everyone, welcome to this class. So we're going to paint a squirrel. I do have a couple of tutorials with voiceover already on Patreon, just FYI. This is a class and we're going to paint this squirrel wet on wet. As you see, it's pretty light, but I decided not to add second layer. So there's a couple areas where I did add second layer, such as the eye. And now we have like this darker area. I just added a little more color for shadows, and then for the fingers, and then maybe the nose, that's where I added the color, and that was it. And then I started with applying the lightest colors first. So I have let's see, yellow ochre, raw sienna, raw umber. You really don't need the three, you can just go with yellow ochre or raw sienna, for example. Now for the reds, I'm going to add some red to it as well, quinacridone red, and then I do see some blue undertones, and you can see like where I added the blue tones. Because I already have on my palette cobalt blue, I'm going to add some cobalt blue, but to be honest, all you need is phthalo blue or either one. You can even use ultramarine light, that would work too. And then we need indigo because it's got a similar shade. So indigo plus one of the blues. Phthalo blue red shade is a primary blue, just FYI, according to Holbein's color chart. And then burnt sienna is my midtones. Once I have the yellows in, some of the blues in, and I will mix some of the blues with a little bit of red, that's when I'm going to start adding some darks, and that's going to be burnt sienna, and then blue mixed with a little bit of red, so that will give me blue violet. So brown plus blue violet, basically, for the darkest areas, the darkest tones. But all the midtones that you see, that's mostly like burnt sienna, some yellow. Eventually you started adding some of the Van Dyke brown. So I have water now on this brush. It's okay to drip actually water on the paper like this because you're going to be wetting this for a while. So again, we're going to avoid the background here. So this is how I'm going to go. On the inside of the squirrel, I'm using the side of the brush actually. I do have quite a bit of water. That's okay at the beginning because you need a lot of water. This is where I want the paint to stop. And then everything else, I just want it to be wet. Everything else nice and wet. So I'm going to first grab the yellows. Oops, this is my lemon yellow, actually slightly blended with that ISO yellow. Maybe it's a good mix actually because I don't have my imidazzle yellow. And then I want to grab this raw sienna and yellow ochre too. So these are my yellows, yellow tones. Try to find like the kind of like, okay, those would be like the yellow areas too, right? Because under yellow, under the orange, you would see some, you would have that yellowish undertone in a way. Of course, we see in a lot of these places, we see blue undertones. We'll wait for that. And first of all, when you mix colors on the paper versus your palette, and when you have yellow and blue, you won't get into that green color as long as you're mixing colors on the paper and kind of placing colors next to each other in a way and slightly blend them. But if you mix yellow and blue on the palette, then you see the shade of green. This is what it looks like. I'm not trying to mix colors again on the palette. I want the mixing to happen on the paper. So not going for like the midtones. There's my indigo. And I want some of the red too. Indigo, phthalo blue, cobalt blue, quin red. So I know it's like a lot of colors in a way. But I want to have these different shades, and I want to mix these colors on the paper. So this is where I'm introducing some of this mix, right? Blend, which is again, phthalo blue, cobalt blue, indigo, and then some of the quin red too. And then there's the ear area, a little more color, more wet red with it. And I want to shape this brush as I'm grabbing a little more of the indigo. So I have a point and then go right there. This is where we have these kind of shadows, something that feels almost like fur when I paint fur, and it's much easier for me to create that softness. So I need to go back very quickly. This needs to be almost like cream top. So between heavy cream and cream top like ratio between water and paint, I just grabbed this more burnt sienna because I already had different colors. I gotta go towards the darkest areas, but also wherever I see like the orange, wherever I see the orange too. So this is the area, and this is like loose, so we don't have to focus like, okay, we need to paint this toe so perfectly and so on. We don't have to. As a matter of fact, this is gonna be like part of our second layer. So we just need a little drop of paint there. And a little more, and this time I'm going to grab a little more of the quin red, maybe too much. So I'm going to readjust by grabbing more of the burnt sienna. So I didn't clean my brush, I just readjusted. And then here's the puffy tail, back to it. I don't want it to dry yet. I'm not ready to give up on this because I still want to add some Van Dyke brown actually, for example. And this is the arm area, kind of like an arm, shoulder, I guess. And then this part, I still need color here. So colors, even though the areas are, for example, very light, you want some colors to bleed, for example. And then with the tip of my brush, I'm dropping a little bit of that burnt sienna there. And maybe here and here. So the next step for me is to add some Van Dyke brown and keep shaping the squirrel. Keep shaping it. And then with the tip of my brush, I'm just going to pull the paint a little bit. Okay, I'm ready to, with that same dirty brush, to grab some of this blue violet. So there's my quin red and some of the blues plus Van Dyke brown, more of the blue violet. And this is the area where I do want to add this shade. This is my shadow underneath the tail. So I'm going to shape it. And I have a couple other areas where I should add this darker shade. Now this really, you need to keep an eye on like the ratio between water and paint, because it needs to be heavier so the paint does not spread much. This is a stage where if you went for like the water-like ratio, then you would just create a bloom, because on this stage, like parts of the paper are a little drier. So that's why it's kind of like I cruise around, I feel it out just to see what else I can do. And I had a little too much paint here, and I could see the separation of colors, but I'm gonna add a little more shadow here before I go back there, because what I need to do is clean my brush, one of the brushes, wipe it on a towel, and actually start pulling the paint. I need to start pulling the paint so it looks soft. And plus, if you notice, another thing you might notice is that the squirrel's tail, and right underneath that is the shadow. The shadow is not really on the tail itself. So just FYI, I'm gonna clean this brush. So here's my rigger brush. This is my size 2 Songbird. And I'm going to grab a cream top-like ratio between water and paint of Van Dyke brown. There's some Van Dyke brown I grabbed, burnt sienna, some of the red. This is like drier paint. So it has to be cream top. Anything more diluted with water will easily give you a bloom. And feel it out, because maybe you don't want it. I feel like I need even drier paint to show that some of these individual hairs. And I'm trying to think, where else do I want to really add it? Because I'll be lifting in just a second. Maybe more of this burnt sienna, like a creamer burnt sienna, like dry paint basically. Well, it's out of a tube, from a tube. Just so I can show like some individual hairs. So pull it, something like that. We gotta do the same thing with the other part, but I'm going to first clean this brush. I added a color here, wet on dry, which is the Van Dyke brown, some burnt sienna, there was some yellow ochre, and then I softened it from the inside, but now it is dried, and so I'm going to grab a little more of the Van Dyke brown, maybe a tiny bit of indigo actually, and then I'm gonna add another layer actually right here. So this is like second layer, or third layer technically, just to make it even darker, because this needs to be way darker. I'm cleaning my brush, I'm wiping it on a towel, and I'm just going to soften this. Feels like I had a little too much paint. Water actually mixed with the paint. So I'm going to slightly pull this. There you go. One more time, cleaning my brush, wiping it on a towel, and then until I have this nice area there. Now I need cream top-like ratio between water and paint, so we have to adjust the ratio because now this is wet, and I just want to add a little more color here, so making it even darker since this is wet. Will be perfect right there. So the last thing I'd like to do is actually just remove masking fluid and see how everything looks with that masking fluid removed. Here's how I went about the details, like hands, and I didn't do much here either. For the hands, and then for the face, and the same areas where I darkened it actually. There's a little maybe more shadow here, so just keep things like that in mind if you want to add more to it and so on. But it's pretty much done, so we just have to wait for it to dry, and then we can remove the masking fluid. Cement pickup eraser, so I just use this to remove the masking, and after that I'll decide if I want to do anything else. So for now I'm just going to remove all the masking fluid. So now it's actually easier to see where I placed it, because all these areas are going to become bright white. And a lot of times it doesn't really work that well, right? When it's so bright white. Rigger brush size 2. So this is my Songbird size 2 rigger brush. And what colors? Basically, like, you can grab some mix of the blue, red, and some Van Dyke brown. You can even grab some burnt sienna. The idea is to actually have like a very light value of that color. So very light value, and you want to do this with the tip of your brush. So I'm going to add these whiskers with the tip of my brush. And where are all these whiskers? They're kind of coming out of the mouth part, or that muzzle. So very gently with the tip of my brush. Actually, I'm gonna zoom in so you can see it better. So here it goes. And these whiskers come from here. It's like you're almost not touching the paper. That's how gently you're adding these whiskers. And I just need to reposition my hand so I don't cover the painting so you can see it. And you just want to create really fine whiskers, and this means that you want to use the tip of your brush to do this, and very gently coming out of these areas, because you can add some hair over there too, and you can add some more hair coming from the tail. But I think that the one thing that I really wanted to do is actually to add these whiskers coming from here. And you want to adjust the ratio between water and paint. This is more like, I'd say, milk-like ratio. That's because these whiskers are a little more like darker. They're more visible in a way. And then we have like little dots. We can add those too. Little spots where the whiskers are coming out of. So a couple more, not too much. And then we have some whiskers coming this way. And the painting is finished. So this is my the version for this class, and this is my test piece. I actually forgot to add whiskers, so I'm going to add some whiskers here as well. I didn't reactivate colors here. I didn't cover the whites, so I'm just going to show you the difference, what it looks like. And you can decide which way you want to go. So thank you so much for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.